Nancy, thank you so much for that introduction. I was going to prepare a PowerPoint, and then I decided not to because I don't know anybody that's ever gone to a meeting and they're like, yay, PowerPoint slides, so I didn't do that. I will send you a PowerPoint presentation momentarily. But I do have some notes just because I don't want to forget any of the funny jokes that were not funny jokes for you guys. So I also brought with me Rick and Lee. Rick and Lee are working on a company with me called Empathic Workplace. And Empathic Workplace believes in teaching people how to connect authentically in the workplace. You've heard that like 70% of people hate their job. I'm not looking for like, you don't have to raise your hand or anything. I'm just saying like 70% of people hate their job. We're looking to change that, and we're looking to change that through empathy. But what I'm really going to talk about today mostly is how to use empathy in workplace investigations. So I started my career, I worked at a police department, I was a dispatcher. I feel like just by saying I'm a dispatcher, there's cops in here that are mad at me just because I was a dispatcher. I'm sorry for everything. But I left the police department because it was cops that told me get out now while you can. You're young, you have a degree, they told me to free myself. No, legit, they told me to free myself. And then I went to go work for Target, and when I was at Target, that's where I first learned how to conduct these non-confrontational interviews. And so I remember I did my first investigation, I had my little folder, I did my first interview, and then the guy admitted, and then he wrote a statement out. Oh, that looks good. And then he wrote a statement out, and then I called in the manager, and I got fired, and then I called a very nice policeman who gave me new bracelets. And as this guy was leaving, he turns around and he says, Angela, thank you. I was like, what? And I really didn't know what to say. I was like, thank you. What do you say to someone that's like, oh, let's do it again sometime? So I went with what my mom taught me, and I just said, you're welcome. And I thought that was a one-off. And it kept happening over and over and over again. And I eventually realized it had absolutely nothing to do with the investigation. They weren't thanking me for the opportunity to be fired and arrested today. They were thanking me because how I was treating them. And I realized that that was the greatest thing that I could, as a teacher, especially at WZ, to be able to teach people how to create that authentic connection in the workplace. So, connection. Connection is neurobiologically why human beings are here. You may have heard that someone can survive 3 days without water, a week without food, and 3 months without connection. So, and that's why solitary confinement is such torture. So if connection is so vital, if we have to have this, it makes sense that the opposite of connection would feel so terrible. I mean, I don't think being real thirsty is awesome. If anyone here has ever experienced a hangover. I'm not saying that you have, I'm just saying hypothetically I've heard that these things are not fun. You know, being really hungry, not a good time. There's a reason they call it hangry. And the opposite of connection is shame. Shame doesn't feel good. Shame's that feeling of there's something that someone's gonna know about me that's gonna make them not want to hire me, not love me, not find me attractive, not wanna be my friend, not wanna sit with me at lunch. That feeling of shame it's one of the worst feelings that we can experience as human beings. Shame's that feeling of, what if they find out that I really have no idea what I'm doing? Yeah, you guys know that feeling? I really think that's universal. Like one of these days, they're gonna like figure out that I've been faking it this whole time. Whether it's as a parent, whether it's at your job, like we're all pretty much just winging it. So the way to make shame worse, I do not want you guys to go make shame worse, but I'm telling you this is how to make shame worse. Silence, secrecy, and judgment. Okay, so let's say for example, someone comes into your office and they plop themselves down and close the door. I mean, it's not usually a good way to have any meeting start with an employee, but they come in, plop themselves down, and they say, I'm gay. Okay, here's how to make that worse. Silence, just stare at them. Feels a little icky in this room. You can feel it, right? Feels icky. Secrecy. Don't tell anyone else that you just said that. Right? Doesn't it feel icky in here? Judgment. If you are. Okay, so that's how to make it worse. And we all know someone that's like this. We all know someone who's judgy. How many of you guys have a friend or a relative that's judgy? You're like excited to go hang out with them? Your Thanksgiving's gonna be a really good time? We're not naming names or anything here. Everything that happens here stays here. But I mean, those are the kind of people, like we prepare these arguments in our head, like we have these fake arguments in our head, like anticipating what we're gonna go say to them when we go see them, and then these arguments never even really happen. Because it's so uncomfortable to be around someone that's like that, and that's because judgment makes us feel shame, which is the opposite of connection, which is, why we're here. So, a little bit of science about this, because I think I promised you guys some science. We have our reptile brain. Our reptile brain, scientists call that the 4 Fs. That's food, fight, flight, and the 4th one has to do about its reproduction. Fornication, don't anyone guess the other F word. I mean, same definition, just, we're being professional here. So that's our reptile brain. Right outside of that's our limbic brain. Our limbic brain is where all our emotions come from. That's where, when we say gut feeling, that's really where that's coming from. Our limbic brain is where we decide whether or not we trust someone. It's where we decide whether or not we're going to be loyal to someone. And this part of the brain does not have capacity for language, which is why when we have those emotions, we say it just feels right. Have you guys ever had a new boss start and they walk in the room and you're like, I don't like them? Or it could be the opposite, it could be positive. They walk in the room, I'm going to like this guy. It's our limbic brain that makes that decision. You've also heard Maya Angelou say, people will not remember what you say, they will not remember what you do, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. So that's our limbic brain that's making that decision. So the neocortex, that's the outside part of the brain, that's where language, rationalizations, that's where we do math, that's where we come up with our decisions. Storytelling, so second part of the science thing. So we want to talk to the limbic brain. The best way to talk to the limbic brain is to tell a story. When we tell a story to someone, human beings are wired to hear that story, and when we hear someone's story, we release cortisol, which is a stress hormone, also causes belly fat, not the best one. I just want someone to tell me if that was, a thing. Cortisol and oxytocin. So oxytocin is a pleasure hormone. So basically our bodies, when we are hearing a story, our brains are preparing ourselves. They're like, oh cool, here's some chemicals so that you can demonstrate empathy. When we tell a story, we're telling that story to the limbic brain. Now when we tell a story in the workplace, so here's what usually happens, is I will get a hand raised about this point and someone will say, well, how am I supposed to tell a story about understanding of something I didn't do? Like, I can never understand murder. I was like, well, then you've never been cheated on. I'm kidding, he's still alive. So whenever someone says that to me, I can never understand murder. I'm like, we're human beings. We can all understand getting to that point. You might not ever get to that point yourself, but I always say, like, what if someone hurt your kid real bad? That's gonna be the time where you're gonna count to 10? No. Several years ago, there was a guy that walked in on his kid being molested, and he beat the ever-living bejesus out of that guy. There was no uprising for people that, was like, maybe he really shouldn't have acted in that emotion right now. There was not a single person that didn't think, everyone thought he did the right thing. In fact, most people were surprised the guy lived. It's because even though we've not been in that situation, we can understand that level of emotion happening. So when we're choosing a story to tell someone, it doesn't have to be the act. Like, if you're talking to someone about, you don't walk in and you're like, well, I'm sleeping with my subordinates too. You don't have to tell someone like, oh, I'm stealing from the company too. Yeah. Oh, you have 100 gigs of porn on your computer? Samesies. That's not how this works. When you're telling a story, you want to match their motive. You want to match the emotion that they were feeling during that process. Because we all have reasons and justifications why we do things. And it's not the act that we're trying to match. So for example, let's say you have someone who is taking money from the company. We can hypothesize that the reason they're taking money is for financial strain. Anyone here make enough money? All right. Anyone here ever get an unexpected bill or have to replace a water heater? or have to replace a roof, or become aware of what your insurance deductible was the first time you had to pay it, or all of a sudden get a phone bill after handing your nephew the phone and say you can pick whatever game you want, and then you don't know that Minecraft includes these coin things or something that they have to buy. Yeah, so we've all had unexpected bills. We've all had these experiences where we've had financial strain. You tell one of those stories. Now, I also get a question here, do the stories have to be true? I mean, I'm gonna lean towards authenticity, but I mean, if you haven't actually gone through something, like I've never been through a divorce. It's because I've never been through a marriage, because I heard it's a leading cause of divorce, and I figure like that, why go? So I can't sit across from someone who's telling me that they're stealing because they gotta pay child support and they can't afford it. I'm not gonna be able to be like, I totally know what you mean, because I don't. But I've got good friends who have gone through divorces. I've taken those late night phone calls. You know, I've listened to stories about child custody, so I can tell a story about someone else that I know that's gotten it, but it's the why, it's that reason, it's that emotion that you're telling them that you understand, without judgment, without secrecy. I mean, confidentiality is a different thing. But doing that without judgment, that's the biggest thing that someone's afraid to tell you during a workplace investigation, is that you're gonna judge them. So I do encourage authenticity. I remember when I realized, so I worked for WZ. I was basically like a human lie detector teacher. Like that was my job. And I was, I think, watching too much Super Soul Sunday on the Oprah channel and trying to figure out my purpose in life. So I was trying to think, like, why did I pick this job? Like, why did I pick a human lie detector job? And I remember saying, sounds like something's happening with the Cubs. That's important. Someone wants to check their phone and advise, I understand. So I'm from Philadelphia. We don't play baseball in October, so you heard that, they didn't hear that.
We should empathize.
You can empathize. Thank you. All right, so I realized that if I wanted authenticity out of people, that's what I wanted. That was my purpose. I didn't want people to lie to me. It was one of those epiphany moments where I had to be authentic myself. So if I'm telling a story that's true, now you don't have to like say like I used to rob banks, look at me now. That's not what I mean. I mean, obviously I don't hurt your credibility. But sometimes we have to get creative. And a lot of times in classes, people are like, yeah, cool, I see how to use this at work, but how do I use this stuff on my kids? So I'll just tell that story. Like I said, sometimes we have to get creative, because just because you've experienced your kids, and kids don't think that we know anything about life. We've never been in middle school. So I'm FaceTiming with my nephew one day, and he's got scratches on his face. And I was like, buddy, how'd you get those scratches? Because I'm assuming he's going to tell me he fell off some motorized something that he has, because that's typically, what he's showing. He's like, look what I got when I fell off my bike. This time he says, like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, oh, we're talking about it. So I said, I go right into interrogator mode. I said, was that an adult or a kid that did that to you? He was like, it was a kid. I said, okay, good, because I'm not ready for my first felony. Like, I could be ready for my first felony, but I'd like to save that up maybe. And so I said, was it on purpose? Was it on accident? He says it was on purpose. Made sure that he understood what those two different words meant. And I come to find out that there's a bully on his bus. And this bully scratches kids' faces and says things like, I'm gonna haunt your dreams. I'm sure his parents are fabulous contributing members of society. Sure. So now I want to teach my nephew how to stand up for yourself, right? So I was like, buddy, you gotta stand up for yourself. He's like, but what if I get in trouble? I was like, well, did anybody tell the principal that this kid's doing this? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, see, then you're not gonna get in trouble. This kid getting in trouble, you're not gonna get in trouble for standing up for yourself. He's like, what about my mommy? I'm like, I taught your mommy how to stand up to bullies too. So I tell the story about mommy's bully and how she handled that. No. How about Aunt Teresa's bully? No. My bully? Not into it. He looked at me like I remember looking at my parents, like, you have no idea what I'm going through. So I had to get creative. Spider-Man. I was like, buddy, does Spider-Man let people push him around? He was like, no. I was like, does Spider-Man let other people get pushed around? He was like, no. I said, if the green, I said the wrong green guy. I said goblin, and it was supposed to be.
That's the bad guy.
Yeah, but I said like he took
Green Hornet.
Green Hornet. I said the wrong green guy, and he told me I couldn't cross universes. So we had to. Eventually, we got to the correct green guy that Spider-Man would stand up to, and I said, "That's a hero. A hero is someone who stands up for what's right, who stands up for other people that are getting picked on." And he was like, "So I could be a hero." I was like, "That's right, buddy. I could be a hero." So that little bully kid doesn't ride the bus anymore. And that's really what telling a story is all about, is what does that person need to hear? Sometimes it takes a couple stories. Sometimes it takes a few stories, but that's really what empathy is all about, is what can I say that's gonna really demonstrate that I understand without judgment. That's not always easy, it's not always easy. But typically the things that we're judging other people about are things that we might be concerned about. I don't judge parents because I'm not a parent. That looks hard. I don't know what I do. I'll Google that, I don't know. I remember asking my godson once, I was like, you didn't come with a manual, so I'm just gonna ask you questions. I was like, are you allowed to have this chocolate milk or this hot chocolate from Starbucks in the back of the seat of the car? And he was like, no. I'm like, okay, well you can just hold it anyway. And so when he spills it all over, he looks at me, he's like, I told you. I'm like, you did. Good point. So it's, what does that person need to hear? What is that person, how have you experienced that? We've all experienced jealousy. We've all experienced shame. You know, people who don't have capacity for emotions are considered sociopaths. So I mean, I'd opt in for you do know these feelings. And that's really what empathy is all about. What questions do you guys have for me?